Hello and welcome to my video on the 3 options for filtration with the Blackmagic URSA 12k. I've extensively tested the LucAdapters Magic Booster over the last couple of years, and I also have the RAWLITE filters in both my pockets. The way I did this test was I set up the 12k and I switched out the adapters throughout the day, but I made sure to white balance per each adapter because they all have their own shifts, magenta, green usually. You can see that the default glass hints a little bit more towards magenta, and that's because of the IR pollution coming through the window. And that's what these adapters slash filters are supposed to help resolve, is get rid of IR pollution so you can get richer blacks. So you can see when we put the LucAdapters on, not only do you get a wider field of view, the image hits a little bit more towards green, but it's more neutral throughout. The blacks are blacker and richer. It's a great adapter. I've had really good experience with it. I'll get into issues later on, but it's pretty cool to use your full frame glass on the URSA 12k, especially with having all that resolution to play with. So now we're on to the RAWLITE OLPF, and it's similar to the LucAdapters. However, I found that the LucAdapters filtration really sucks out all the magenta, which is fine. Like if you're David Fincher, that's fine. But the reason I don't like that is it tends to make people's lips look very drained of all life. So I've had to compensate that usually in post to match it to my pockets, for instance. Whereas with the RAWLITE, you can see that it's more contrasty by default. You can see that the color of her lips hasn't been drained totally, and that's what she actually looked like. That's what the room actually looked like. So I would say it's the most accurate, but both are totally usable and workable. So when you put the 3 beside, you can see obviously the LucAdapters is a much wider field of view. This is 24mm on a 24-70 lens. And this is all personal preference. I really like speed boosters. I love being able to use all the glass that I technically paid for. It's nice to be able to match the same optical look as full frame cameras that you might use alongside this. Also take advantage of image stabilization, which is built into the 24-70mm. And here's the big issue with the LucAdapters. You see that there is flare. And this problem actually, it made me think of a different solution to using the LucAdapters, because I've been using it for the last, I think, 2 years. And it's great. Like the flaring is pretty cool when you're shooting, running around doing some B-roll or whatever. It's like, the flare is cool. But when you're setting up for an interview, I find that you'll get this backlight bleed that it happens about 45 degrees on either side. Also happens from the top and the bottom. It might be a window off in the distance or your backlight just flaring. And then you spend 15 minutes trying to control those flares, and then you'd also get like a lower contrast overall because it's picking up flares that you can't really see defined optically, but it's just washing the entire image. So I found situations where I've set up the 12K and I'm like, I don't want to deal with the flare, so I just put it down and throw up a pocket. So let's take a closer look at the default glass and the RAWLITE OLPF. So you can see the hoodie, the color difference, the magenta cast that's on the default glass in the 12K, and then the RAWLITE is black, and that's pretty much what you want. Hans, who makes these, has told me basically that when you add ND to either of these situations, the default glass in the Blackmagic is going to, especially with harsher sunlight, is going to get redder and redder and redder till it gets really difficult to color correct. Whereas the RAWLITE, through any ND filtration, whether it's your own or the built-in one of the 12K, is going to stay the same. That's why I would recommend having the RAWLITE across all your cameras. But this is the reason I did this test, is I wanted to show the difference between the LucAdapters and RAWLITE pretty much. And you can get them very similar in post with a little bit of work. But it's that flare on the LucAdapters that has caused a professional issue for me. And depending on the kind of work, like I love this adapter. The speed booster, it's a beautiful piece of work, the way it fits seamlessly in the camera. It's super easy to install. But until this flare issue is fixed, I can't recommend it for controlled environment setup where you're really trying to get rid of unwanted flares. But if you're running around outside and it's dramatic and you're running through sunflowers and fields or whatever, the flare can be kind of cool. Anyways, that's my test. I hope this wasn't too much of a rant and you learned something. I'm happy to answer any questions. I'm by no means a scientist or some guy with color charts everywhere, but if this is helpful for anyone who does their own coloring and editing and wants to have something to work with off the top, that's fairly easy. The RAWLITE is fantastic. I have it in both my pocket 4Ks and now the 12K, so they all match great. And I hope it works out for you. And my dream is to have LucAdapters and RAWLITE combine forces and make a non-flary, color accurate speed booster that will work across all the URSA cameras and maybe beyond, maybe a speed booster for the pockets or whatever. Anyways, that's it. I'm done. Bye.